Good evening, everyone. We'll give it a couple minutes and allow some more people to come in. Outstanding. Seeing a few people start to follow the stream. We'll wait a couple minutes and see if we get any more people before we begin. Everyone that's joined in so far, thank you for taking your time tonight. So far, we've got 45 people watching, which is outstanding. We will go ahead and start in a couple of minutes once we allow other people to get here so that everyone can hear the same message. We'll give it about 20 more seconds and we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks again for everyone who's taking their time out tonight to learn and engage so we can learn a little bit more about the referendum that will be on the November 2020 ballot. Okay, so seeing as though the number of people watching is stabilized, I'm going to go ahead and get started. The process for tonight will be, we will just be live at this point. I saw a question come through. I apologize if that is confusing. We will just be on the live at this point. We will not be in a separate messenger room. So the intent of tonight is to engage in a dialogue to help explain and to answer any questions that revolve around the Meridian 223 referendum on the November ballot. The process that we'll use tonight is I will kind of go through 8 to 10 minutes and explain the context of where we were versus where we are and where we want to go. And then I will answer as many questions as come through in the comment thread. If a lot of questions come through, there's a chance I may miss them. So if I do not get to your question, just continue to put it into the comments and I will respond as quickly as I can. The hope is that we continue this conversation as long as it takes. If it takes 4 hours, it takes 4 hours. If it takes 40 minutes, it takes 40 minutes. Once the questions cease, we will go ahead and end the town hall. So as we begin, I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to be here. As the leader of this district, I get that anytime that we ask a question about a referendum, it's a really, really personal choice. And so our goal is to make sure that you're as informed as possible. And that is really my role in this process, is to help you have as much information as you can to make as educated a choice as you can. As a reminder, as we enter into the referendum process, we have 49 days before the election. School employees, when on the clock or acting in their official capacity, so when I'm acting as superintendent or a teacher is acting as a teacher, we cannot advocate for or against a referendum. And the same holds true for board members. When anyone is acting outside of their official capacity as private citizens, they can do whatever they please. This goes for board members, teachers, etc. Given the line that between official capacity and not being in official capacity is really murky for myself as superintendent and school leaders, we intend to just remain as information providers at all times and not to advocate on one side or the other. Before we begin, I think it's important to go over the background information and facts and figures to provide context before we open it up for questions. The district first began discussions of needing a referendum roughly 8 years ago. The district sought a referendum in the spring of 2013 and failed. The district then sought to pass a $2 million worth of working cash bonds, and those were petitioned onto the ballot. At that point, the board decided if those were going to be on the ballot, they may as well ask for a referendum. So that referendum question was put onto the ballot in November of 2014. The way that was phrased is it was a term referendum. And so what a term referendum is simply a referendum that expires. This is much more the exception than it is the norm. When there's increases in a particular fund, which this is an increase in the education fund, but such is our reality. So right now, we are in year 6 of the 7-year referendum. Between the time the district decided to seek the referendum and it going onto the ballot is when I arrived as superintendent. And the situation in the district was pretty extreme. We had about a $1 million shortfall in our annual budget, and our operating percentage was down to roughly 25%. Operating percentages are important. Those are the funds at which we can expend that we typically spend on a daily basis to run. So for us, that's education, operations, transportation, and working cash. The reason 25% number is so key is that at 25%, we get really close to having to take out tax anticipation warrants. The way that schools get their money is non-exact, meaning we get a bunch of money in July, we get a lot of money in September, and then we get a little bit of money throughout the rest of the year. So when you're down below 25%, there are times where you would potentially have to take out a loan just in order to make ends meet, make your payment, etc. So we're about 25% of our operating reserve, so we're right teetering on that edge, and our annual budget was a significant shortfall. So the district took corrective action to try to balance the budget the best they could, and this included a really dramatic board meeting. For those of you that were here, remember it, where over 20 staff members were reduced, programs were cut, and so were junior high athletics. When our district, and in particular, I communicated to the community about the need for the referendum in 2014, we used a terminology of a perfect storm. The perfect storm is described in 2014, referred to many things negatively impacting the budget all at the same time. Namely, there was 4 things happening. 1, we owed money to the landfill for repayment on overtaxation. EAVs in the community were dropping. Enrollment was declining. And revenue from the state was commonly being prorated, which means the state would say, you should get X amount of money, but we're going to give you 87% or 93% or 97% of that money. So all of those things collectively were leading to our budget shortfall. And we also communicated during that time that if we were able to receive additional revenue, we would restore many parts of what was already cut. Some things were left aside. We shared with everyone what would be preserved. So basically, these are the next things that were to be cut if the referendum didn't pass, but we are not going to cut them now. And we would also talk about what we intended to do to progress forward. In addition, we noted that we did not anticipate additional tax increases outside of previously scheduled bond and interest increases. So just to make sure everyone understands, during the last referendum that was on the ballot in November 2014, the talking points were that we were in this perfect financial storm. We told people what was going to be restored, what was going to be preserved, and how we would progress. And we shared that we did not anticipate increasing the tax rate beyond what was already previously scheduled. Now, last time when we went through this process, I was new, and so I inherited other people's problems. So it's easy for me to come in here and say that I was going to help fix those things. Now, obviously, this has been my life's work for the last 6 years. And so from my lens, I sincerely believe that we did much, if not all of what we said we would do during the last referendum campaign. And that brings us to this point. So if I was sitting in your seat as a taxpayer, what I would ask is, all right, Capozzi, you told us we needed more money because of this perfect storm. Does that perfect storm still exist? And the answer is quite simply no. It doesn't exist. EAVs have been on the rise. We paid off our debts to the landfill, and the state has operated in good faith. So the follow-up question I would ask if I were you is, without the perfect storm, why is the additional revenue still needed? And then in particular, why is it needed forever? And the reason that I would share with that is there's 2 data-driven reasons for that, but more importantly, there's a reason that I don't believe is really grounded in numbers. First, even with the additional revenue we're procuring from the referendum, which is over $1 million annually, we are still funded at what the state has determined is 68% of what is necessary to provide students all the support necessary to reach standard. So the terminology of the state is adequacy. We are funded at 68% of adequacy, even with the $1 million+ coming in from the referendum. And the second financial data-based reason as to why we still need this referendum, and I shouldn't say we need the referendum, why the district's operations would benefit from continuing to have the additional revenue, is that even with the increased tax rate, which again transparently puts our tax rate among the highest in the northwest portion of the state, we still bring in near the bottom of tax revenue per student in that same area. Meaning that even though our rate is higher, given where our EAV is in our enrollment, we bring in less money per student than many of our peer districts. it's important for us to realize that we have an over-reliance in our district on taxation of individuals and farms because we have a lack of industry and commercial property in the district. So without multi-million-dollar entities, with the exception of the landfill, that take the burden of taxation, to use an example of our neighbor, Byron, a lot of the taxation burden falls currently and hopefully in the future on the nuclear plant. Whereas we don't have a commercial or industrial source of revenue like that, it falls on the back of taxpayers like you and your neighbors. So those are the two data-based reasons. The less data-based reason is pretty simple. And like I said before, I'm biased because this has been our work, but I think we're doing really good work in the last 6 years. Just a couple examples are 6 years ago when the state testing became something that would be done on a computer, we had to ask for a waiver from the state because we didn't have the technology necessary even to do state testing over time. And now we're a fully one-to-one district with neighboring districts asking to help borrow some of our technology. We went from a district that had some significant culture issues because of what was happening, of the consistent turnover of administration and of the board, that we'd have 5 to 10% turnover each year. To last year, we had 0 voluntary turnover between our administration and our teachers. Additionally, we've received numerous national and state level recognitions, and some, again, transparently, we have applied for, but others are just simply based on data. And those are some awards. The ones that are based on data we do not apply for are things that we've never achieved in the history of our district before. So I truly believe that we're on the right path. So the question becomes whether, without the $1 million that comes from the referendum, if renewed, what happens to the district? And what I can say is that there would still be a district, right? There'd still be a board of education, there'd still be a superintendent, there'd still be administrators and the teachers. The issue would be that if the referendum isn't renewed, instead of thinking about what we're going to do to continue to progress and continue to best serve students, the question begins again as to what programs and people do we need to cut or eliminate in order to balance our budget. And to that, I would say that we have lived within our means over the last 6 years. I shared with you before, operating revenue in reserve was in the 25th percentile. We're up to the 63rd percentile, which means that we now have enough money to survive a rainy day. That rainy day that COVID brought forward is something we're able to handle. And that 63% accounts for all the additional COVID-related expenditures. So we're in a healthy position as a district. But if the additional referendum revenue stop coming in, the position will change drastically. We'll go from healthy to unhealthy, or the other option for us is that the experience and opportunities that we provide for students will have to change in order to make up for the money that we are no longer receiving. So again, if I'm sitting here listening to this, if I'm you, the question becomes, how does this impact me? The answer is the tax rate and the education fund will stay the same. If the referendum is voted down and the term of the referendum expires in a year and a half, people will see their education tax rate decrease. And so to put numbers to that so people can understand, those that live in a $150,000 house, and if anyone needs exact numbers as to my house is valued at, what does it impact for me, I am happy to provide that for you offline. But $150,000 house is a decent middle ground for our district. If you live in a $150,000 house, your taxes increase and it's owner occupied, meaning that you live in your house and you're not a senior citizen. It's about $309 a year is the increase that you paid as a result of the last referendum. Again, that would not be an increase based on what you paid last year, but if the referendum is defeated in a year and a half, that you would realize that $300 or so as a savings in the edge fund. So that is the explanation. That is where we're at. I think it's important to provide the context so that everyone understands where we're coming from. And at this point, I'm happy to answer any questions. I have been focused on the camera, so I have not looked at the questions. So give me a second, and I will go as close to in order as I can to answer any questions you may have. So there's a question about my compensation. So my compensation. So let me frame the question appropriately. Regardless of the referendum passes or not, there will be a superintendent that sits in the seat. My compensation, I'm not exactly sure what it is compared to the last person. What I can tell you is that my compensation year over year has been a steady, slow increase. And I will tell you that in the Northwest region, the 51 districts that comprise the Northwest region, for people with my level of experience, there's one person that I make more than, which means that there's one person with more experience that makes less than me. And that person has not finished their education, nor, and they also have a district of a size about 500 people. But what I will share with you is this, is that if my salary is dependent on whether or not you are going to vote for the referendum, my guess is probably, my encouragement is this, is that this referendum is about way more than me. And it's about the 1,550 kids that we serve and the 220 some employees that we have in districts. So if you are unhappy with my salary, I apologize, but I would encourage you when you're debating the question as to whether the district needs to bring in additional revenue, that you consider that. What was decided with the land adjacent to the high school? So the land adjacent to the high school is now fully owned by the district. So at the time of the last referendum, we were still paying on that, and that was a cause of consternation in the community. Since that time, it is now ours. So now it is a revenue-making property for us. So we go out for public bid for that each year or each term of year. So I think currently we're in a 4-year contract. So right now that procures revenue for us. If there ever came a time where we were able to have a different outlook for the district, where we were either increasing in size or the community wanted another building, that would be the site that we would look at to build. Again, I don't necessarily see that in the cards, and that would certainly be a question for the community, not something that I would simply decide. Carrie, I see that you said that you think that some of the upgrades that you saw were not necessary. So the majority of the upgrades that you have seen in the district were paid for as a result of health, life, safety, not as a result of the referendum. So health, life, safety is a process that we go through every 10 years where the Regional Office of Education and an architect goes through and tells us where different elements of our buildings are not up to code. When they're not up to code, we are then compelled by law to fix them. So when you see things that were improved upon, such as the parking lot at the high school or roofing, those types of things were all done out of health, life, safety. If you're talking about the other two things, which I get questions about, so Carrie, I'm not saying that these are your questions, but are questions that come to my office quite frequently, would be what about the football field lights? And what about the driveway at the transportation? Those are two questions I get right away. So if there's other specific things you have questions about, please list them and I'll address them the best that I can. Transportation is funded out of the transportation fund. So we managed our budget within that particular fund. So the ed fund has nothing to do with it. In our scenario, has nothing to do with the transportation fund. So we paid for it out of that. The football field lights were in disrepair, so we asked people to come in to repair them, and no one would touch the lights on top of the poles because the poles were rotting. So we ended up with a liability concern, which is why the football lights were replaced. Is it true that the district is bringing in more money than it has? Yeah, that's what I tried to address when saying the perfect storm is over. So we are bringing in more revenue than we have in the past. That, again, still puts us at the 68th percentile. That still puts us with if not the lowest, among the lowest expenditure per pupil in the area, both instructionally and operationally. And it puts us in terms of, even with the additional tax dollars, among the lowest dollars per capita of student brought in. That said, we are bringing in more money. And what I would say is that I believe that we are doing the best we can with that money. I think we're doing all things that align with the outcomes that we've collaboratively worked on, meaning that we want to create a world-class environment and a world-class education for our students and for our community, quite frankly. Our schools are, I believe, again, and I'm biased, but I believe they are the centerpiece of the community. And so the better our schools do, I think it's a better representation on our community. I think we've done a very good job of transforming quite a bit in 6 years. Layla, if the referendum passes, the taxes will stay at the rate they are in the education fund. That means in some other funds, over time, may they increase? Yes. Next year, no. But if your property value goes up, the way that taxes work, which you may or may not be aware, is a function of a mathematical equation of the tax rate versus your property value. So while the rate may stay the same, if your property value goes up, then you would pay more in. Scott, as it's proposed, the referendum does not have a term at this time. Sam, there is no exact, so this is not a referendum. So typically, if we would go out to referendum in the building fund, it would be, we're going to do this to be able to execute this project. This is so that we can continue the work that we've done and continue to progress in that work. So the work that we've done, and you will get a large packet of that comes out Friday. We've completely revamped the technology and ecosystem within the district, which thankfully we did given the times that we ran into. And we've made improvements in, I would say, literally every school, almost in every department, and then of each school, and then also within the overall scheme of the direction that the district is heading. So if the referendum is successfully passed again, what it allows us to do is to continue that work. Without the referendum, we end up with a budget shortfall, which means that we are in a position then, again, to reduce, which then instead of progressing forward, we are saying which of the programs or the people within our district are not necessary, or could we most do without in order to help achieve what we want to do to provide opportunities for kids. Is there any question that I've missed at this point? Can we add programs to the high school and bring back more educators and support staff now that we're in a better position? So we have. The one program that gets brought up all the time is Family and Consumer Sciences. And again, we've made a strategic decision to add in different areas instead of there. So I cannot promise, nor will I tell you to anticipate that Family and Consumer Sciences would be brought back. But what I will say is that we'll continue to, based on the goals that we establish collectively as a district and then individually at different buildings, if there is additional revenue, then it allows us to perform and add in the ways that we find best. So examples of positions that were added was the college and career coordinator. So anyone that has a student at the high school currently or has one in the last couple of years, I think they would tell you we fundamentally transformed what we do to try to provide opportunities for kids as they are exiting to make sure that they're college and career ready. If we've added special education support for our most at-risk kids, we've added positions of Medicare supported instructional aides so that not only we can provide additional support, but we can procure some additional revenue back from the federal government in those ends. We've added counselor at the elementary school. So those are the types of positions that we've added. Nate, I know that one of the questions that would certainly come up is one of the positions that we cut last time was administration. We have not added that position back. So as we have added positions back, they have been around our support staff and around our certified staff in order to serve students. They have not been around administration. Yes, Sandy. So every time property value goes up, then we receive additional money. What you will see on your property tax bill, if you look now, you will see that the rate has lowered. So while we received more money, we decreased the rate as much as we could and didn't secure all of the money up front that we could have in this past year in order to do what we thought was the appropriate thing to do to be fiscally conservative and responsible for our taxpayers. But yes, every time the EAV goes up, then we, at the same tax rate, secure additional dollars. That said, funding from the state is flat at this time, and I don't anticipate it going up given the financial situation of the state. And as you know, operating any business costs increase, whether it be salary increases, whether it be software contracts, whether it be insurance. So as that money increases and comes in, while it's definitely useful, we are also not in a position where it's just superfluous and we're not making use of it driving toward our goals. So Nicole, the the choice that we had when we received the additional money was either we could take all the additional revenue and just put it away and continue to operate as is, or what I lobbied the board for, and the board allowed me to do, was to say, we have the money coming in. Let's continue to put a little money away each year to put ourselves back in a healthy financial position. But let's try to do whatever we can to produce the best possible outcomes for kids. And so that's why we've invested in the positions and the programs and the technology that we have in order to try to transform the experience on behalf of kids. So we didn't just take all of the additional revenue and stay status quo and keep it so we didn't have to ask another time. Given that it was a term referendum, we knew that we would come back and ask the community. And so really that's the question, right? Like, we have, again, I'm biased, but I believe we've made significant progress in the last 6 years. And if we've made significant progress in the last 6 years, is that the trajectory that we want to continue to go on? Or if the referendum doesn't pass, then we're in a position where we have to, again, determine what's most important to us, as we have to look at potentially reducing programs or people. And again, that's quite literally what the board is elected to do and what I'm hired to do. So if the referendum is not passed, we will certainly have a budget, and we will certainly make ends meet in a way that we can continue to exist as a district. The important thing for the community to recognize is that will fundamentally look different for students then. Larger class sizes, less opportunities, less programs. Those are the choices that we would have to make to offset the decrease in revenue. Scott, I know you didn't ask this question directly, but it's come up with a couple other people in general conversation, so I just want to address it. Our district receives nothing directly from Exelon. That said, our district benefits dramatically from Exelon being within our larger community, not our district, but our community. It benefits from having awesome families that work at Exelon. It benefits from the fact that over 70% of the overall tax recouped from the entire county comes from that one entity. So with Exelon in flux, it makes the entire county nervous as a taxing body, but it also, I totally understand where it puts individual families in a really trying spot to make this decision. So I'm sorry if I missed your question. Can you type it in again? I can go ahead and answer that for you. Thanks for typing that in. I don't know who did it from Meridian. So right now it's about $1.2 million. As EAV increases, that number continues to increase. So it's a significant chunk of what we do to operate in terms of the money that would be gone. In terms of additional foreign languages, I think there's lots of programs we would like to add. And just transparently, I would love to see our foreign language pushed down to elementary ages and brought forward. The research is quite abundant that the earlier that we introduce these concepts for kids, the better our chances at allowing them to stick and truly be bilingual. So there are lots of things that we would like to do that, again, we are living within the means of a budget, right? So at the current time, we don't have this massive additional bucket of money, and the referendum isn't going to provide that for us. What we're trying to do is to continue to kind of live in the manner that we are. So as we look at potentially adding programs, and the principals will laugh when I say this, when they all approach me and say, can we add a program? I said, sure, what are we going to cut? Because typically we are trying to get to a balanced budget at this point. Amy, that's a wonderful question. So I probably should have explained this better. When I was describing the vernacular that we used in the 2014 referendum, we talked about the perfect storm, and part of that was enrollment was falling. So the current way that schools are funded is called evidence-based funding. It's been passed in the last 6 years. And evidence-based funding holds districts harmless, which means that from year to year, you can't get less than you got the year before. So even though our enrollment is falling, our projected financial impact from the state would be flat. What that impacts is that adequacy number, because when we are adequacy is a per pupil metric that they're looking at. So if we have less kids to serve, then it looks like we have a better adequacy number. So if right now we're at 68%, say we lost 100 kids, that number might go up to 71%. So our money from the state is projected to be flat, unless, of course, there's a proration to the entire state as a result of the financial condition that we are in overall, which, again, I don't think is beyond the realm of possibility. Okay, great question. So heating and air conditioning is a significant problem. But it's hard to have these meetings because school finance, it's not hard, it's just complex. And so when we are talking about raising money in the education fund that goes toward education, when we are talking about buildings and grounds or facilities, then those are things that operate in a different way. So we are beyond expected life with our HVAC systems. So this is something we've been planning for I've been here 8 years. This is my 8th year. I think we've been planning for it for about 5 years. And so what we're trying to do is get as much life out of them as we can in a safe and responsible manner before we look to redo our HVAC systems. The HVAC systems what we would have to do with that is to go out to bond for them. But we believe that if we can get a couple more years out of it, we can replace the HVAC systems, again, within about 5 years without impacting the tax rate. So we are trying to extend the life as much as possible to be fiscally responsible. I would love to just replace the HVAC right now, but for us, it's about a $14 to $15 million investment. So again, these things are complex as we play them out. Randy, I'm not sure what you're talking about. What I can tell you is that the arbitrary metric to determine school success nationally is the U.S. News and World Report. It's based on solely data. There is no application process. The district had never been recognized. It's been recognized 4 consecutive years. So I'm not sure what metric you're looking at, but I'd be happy to discuss that with you. Again, I would encourage you, Randy, clearly you're not a fan of mine, and that's okay. But I would just encourage you to think that this referendum is much bigger than me. And if it's not me sitting in the chair, there will be a superintendent trying to figure out how to balance a budget to best serve kids. I'm sorry if I've missed any questions at this point. If I've missed your question, can you put it back in the chat and I'll get to it as soon as I can? Okay, seeing no questions this time, I'm going to fill some space for about a minute, and then we'll go ahead and conclude if we don't see anything. We will do a face-to-face town hall at the Stillman Valley Fire Department in a week from today, same time. All the town halls will be on Tuesday if you're thinking about how we're going to move forward. All Tuesdays at 5:30, and we'll alternate from fire department to online Facebook town halls. The town halls, if you want to be there, we are going to follow the guidance that we've been given from the state. So that would be social distancing, max capacity of 50, and masks. So again, that will be next week. We will be at the Stillman Valley Fire Department. The Tuesday following that will be Facebook Live again, then Davis Junction Fire Department, then Facebook Live, then Monroe Center Fire Department. So we will hit all of the communities if you want to come out. What you will see in the email that I send out Friday is I will take questions that I will kind of add to this feed. We'll put as part of the frequently asked questions so that next time we can get a little bit deeper if anyone has any additional questions. Sandy, what we have learned, at least what I believe, is that we have a fundamental kind of imbalance in terms of the revenue we collect with our 2.78 rate in the ed fund to operate at a competitive level compared to if we were at a 3.48. So for us, bringing the money into the ed fund permanently allows us to plan and execute a little bit differently. What we hope, and I know that many people that that don't want to trust the district will say is that, well, no matter what, you're going to tax us at the maximum law will wait. Even if, a large corporation comes in and you don't need it anymore, what I would ask people to do is to reflect on the tax rate over the last 6 years, which after we had scheduled raises and bond and interest, we brought down year over year over year by not levying at our maximum rate in order to be a good partner with our community. So we believe that in order for us to function at a high level, there's a fundamental imbalance for us if we do not have that additional revenue over time. All right, thank you guys so much. Again, even do we receive money from the landfill in Davis Junction? Yes, so we receive tax money from the landfill in Davis Junction, like we would any other taxing body. The reason we had to repay them in the past is because they had appealed through the Property Tax Appeal Board their valuation, and they had won, and the district had collected the money in a decision that, again, predates pretty much anyone that's on the board or myself, and we had to repay that money over time. I think it also should be noted that the Village of Davis Junction is a really, really strong partner for us and takes care of and provides some supplies for our teachers as well. So Scott, like I said, we can operate more frugally. So I want to be abundantly clear. We are not bare bones. We are trying to become a more successful district that better serves kids. And so we are making decisions that allow us to stay within the current budget we have that allow us to pursue those things. If we don't have the referendum money, then we have to look at reducing. But while we have that money coming in, and hopefully it's permanently, then my job is to work with our principals and our leadership team and our teachers collectively to find the best possible way to support their success. And that recommendation came directly from the improvement process that took place at the high school. They said this is what we need to better serve our kids. And I would think that if you talk to the community members that have seen the value that position is added, it is well worth the money that we spend. All right, everyone. So everyone knows my cell phone number is 815-980-0310. You can text me or call me 24/7. I'm connected. This is my job to provide you information. I think everyone has my email address. So feel free to contact me with any questions. And again, I want to be very clear from my perspective, and this is an incredibly personal decision. My job isn't to convince you to vote one way or the other. My job is just to lay out the facts for you. So if you have any questions, please continue to look into that and let me know. We have 49 days until Election Day. My job is to be as accessible to you in the meantime as possible. Thank you, and make it a great day.